All right, let's dive into something pretty powerful. We're going to break down a critical diagnosis of modern India, a perspective that's delivered in what is essentially one single, breathless sentence. It's a really provocative piece of commentary, so let's get right into it.
It all kicks off with this one line. In a country where content creators are showing reality. Right out of the gate, that makes you ask a question, doesn't it? If they're the ones showing reality, then who isn't? This one phrase really sets the stage for the central theme, a society where everyone's roles seem to be completely flipped upside down.
And that brings us to the first big idea from this commentary, this massive exchange of roles. The whole argument here is that in modern India, the people you'd expect to be doing certain jobs, well, they just aren't. Someone else is.
And here's the first really sharp example of that. The source claims that it's the comedians who are now doing journalism. Speaking truth to power, asking the hard questions, while the government is the one providing the comedy. I mean, just think about that. It's a total reversal of what you'd normally expect.
And this role swap idea continues when you look at the media landscape. The argument goes that while professional journalists are out there hunting for content, chasing clicks and viral moments, it's the independent creators who stepped into the gap to show what's actually happening on the ground, unfiltered. That is a pretty direct critique of an entire industry. Now, this isn't just about media and politics. The commentary then points to teachers. It says they're now saddled with all these extra tasks, things like managing school meals or doing election duty. These are responsibilities that the source argues should really belong to the government, which is kind of seen as missing in action here.
So, okay, if everyone's doing someone else's job, what does that really say about the nation's priorities? According to this critique, it means what society values most is completely out of whack.
And this is where the argument gets even more pointed. The source claims that the national conversation is just dominated by debates over religious buildings, while something as fundamental as the state of our schools has become a secondary issue. It's a real challenge to where the country's focus lies. But it's not just about misplaced priorities. The critique escalates this point dramatically. It suggests the situation has become so extreme that simply talking about the need for better education could be treated as some kind of transgression.
So, what's the fallout from all that? When education isn't the priority and the debate around it gets shut down? Well, according to the source, the direct result is a nation that starts getting stuck looking backwards, getting more and more tangled up in its past instead of building its future.
All right, next, the critique zooms in on the nitty-gritty of society and politics, using some very specific examples to paint a bigger picture of the whole situation. The lens then turns to the world of arts and culture. The source makes the claim that the country's cinema isn't really driven by great storytelling anymore, but has become totally dependent on politics. That's a huge statement about the state of culture itself. Then you get this example, which is kind of surreal. The idea that an orange-colored phone could be linked to something divine. This is presented as a symptom of a much bigger issue, right? A society where the lines between faith, consumerism, and national symbols have just become completely blurred. This slide lays out a really powerful contrast. On one side, you have the traditional expectation, parents telling their kids, you have to study. But on the other side is the reality the source points to. A young child is allowed to leave that path to become a baba, a kind of child's spiritual figure, and the parents actually approve. Okay, so all of these points, the role reversals, the skewed priorities, the social observations, they've all been building up to this. The source is now pulling everything together into one final fundamental question. The final critique here is all about policy. The source contrasts these big announcements about providing temporary relief, like food rations, with the much, much harder work of actually solving the root cause of the problem, which is poverty itself. It's the difference between a quick fix and a real solution.
And so after this whole rapid-fire diagnosis, the source doesn't give us a solution. It doesn't offer a way out. It just leaves us with this one haunting question. In a country where all of this is happening, what can its future possibly be? And that's a question left for all of us to think about.